Thank you, Sam. This is Andy. I'm going to go ahead and be the one who starts off today. And at the outset, I do want to say it's only a proposal. And for those people who've been doing this as long as Carl and I have been doing this, remember a time when here came a proposal and then there were comments and then there might have been some revisions in the proposal and things would change and it was like, I don't have time. There's too many things that I have to worry about a proposal. I'll put this aside until there's a final rule, and then I'll dig into it. That doesn't work in this case because there are so many proposals that are coming out that are pending, that everybody has to deal with. We believe that there's going to be a fairly short time between here's the final rule and here's when it's going to be effective. Now, one of the questions that somebody's going to send us is going to be, when are these rules going to be finally effective? The answer is we hadn't got a clue. Nobody does right now because they need to see what the comments are going to do and what kind of changes bankers are going to have. And so there's a lot of things that tie into it. So that question can't be answered at this point in time. That said, there are some things, some basics that I want to cover with you. Number one, you've got the materials. And that's a good packet that you can look through and make some highlights on. You've also got, hopefully, and been able to print out the stack of PowerPoint slides that you can make notes on. Everything that's in the materials, just about everything, is going to be in those slides. At the very end, though, Carl said, we really need to be able to mention HOEPA and some of these things. They're not directly on point with finance charge and APRs, but they're directly related. And so we want to make sure that we could give you as much information as possible. So there's more, especially towards the end of the slide deck, than you're going to find in the materials. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, if you have a problem around slide 8, where in the upper right-hand corner of the slide it refers to the materials, if that looks like it's off, then just deduct 1 from the page number to reference in the materials. I think I may have had a repagination or something in my Word document after the slides were done that caused that to be thrown off. It looked that way when I was flipping through them this morning. So that's important to remember. Also, in your materials you have a little download chart, which is not the gospel according to the CFPB, but it's a pretty good guess. And it's the idea of this finance charge table is to show you a condensed version of a tool that many bankers use right now. And one of the keys to this entire proposal is these finance charges. What's going to be into the finance charge and how's that going to impact your annual percentage rate and the disclosures that you have to make? If you begin to look at that finance charge table, if you printed it out, you're going to see where there are some no's under the old rule, there are yeses under the new rule. So it's going to be simpler, but it's a double-edged sword because it's going to be more expensive for you is what it really comes down to. What these rules tell us is that, the new rules, is that whereas you had these charts in the past that you had to use for cheat sheets, for training, for these kind of things, in a large part, those are going to be replaced by, it's probably going to be a finance charge. So you don't need a cheat sheet. You're going to have to know the basic rules. And that's what a whole lot of this is about, is trying to make things simpler so that the consumer, and the whole emphasis here is on the consumer. It's not what's going to be easiest for the banker, for the lender. The whole thing is what's going to be easiest for the consumer. That's where this focus is. So some of the things we're going to talk about today is the comment period, because originally we thought, well, this comment period would just about be gone. Well, no, there was an extension to that, so we're going to discuss that. The background is important because, as any seasoned compliance professional can tell you, years from now, literally years from now, you're going to be asked to make some opinions. Is this a finance charge, or why do we have to make this disclosure, or what's the timing requirements of this disclosure? And you can come back to the proposals that we have pending right now. And as you read through those documents, you'll see the thought process. This is why this rule is proposed this way. This is almost going to be similar to Regulation E in that it is so consumer-centric. If you have to make an opinion, if you rule for the consumer, you're probably going to be correct. This is going to follow in that same vein to a large degree. It's going to fall over. There are some exemptions, and we're going to talk about those. Biggest change here, this proposal is about integrating RESPA disclosures with Reg Z disclosures. But finance charges and the resulting APRs is a big part of that. That, of course, is going to transcend over into disclosures that you make. And then we have to talk about the accuracy rules. And again, in some respects, it's easier. In some respects, it means that it might be harder. The bottom line is you still have some time to make comments on this, and we would really encourage you to make those comments so that you can get your opinion across to the CFPB so that they understand where you're coming from as well. Now we're on to slide 3, and you can see up in there I've got manual page 8, and I'm actually on my manual on page 7, where I talk about the heading is the proposed comment period. So what do we have here? We have a 343-page document that came out in the Federal Register. If you got the CFPB version, which was released a little bit earlier, and the CFPB is releasing that on their site earlier because they recognize, hey, we have a very short time span. Their intent is to protect the consumer, and the quicker they can get a lot of these rules in place, they figure the quicker the consumers are going to be better protected. So they're telling banks, you need to look at this from the date we release it, not necessarily when it's posted in the Federal Register. Still the same, 1,099 pages from the CFPB, 343 pages in the Federal Register, where it's in that nice 3-column format. There's a lot of material in there. Now, again, there are many aspects of integrating RESPA, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, and the Truth in Lending Act disclosures, and we're going to talk about some of the reasons for that. The comment period was originally going to be November the 6th on this proposal, less 2 sections that were particular to Reg Z that dealt with addressing changes of the definition of a finance charge, which is the real brunt of today's webinar, and then to delay implementation on some of the other disclosure requirements. So that kind of all came about. Subsequently, I think it was last Thursday, when they came out and said, okay, we're going to leave one part, the delay of implementation, we're going to leave that unchanged, but we're going to give you a little bit of an extension on the finance charge dates. So you're going to be able to take a lot of the comments that we have here today, add your thoughts to that, and hopefully send in some comment letters that say you need to make some increases here, some decreases there. We understand where we're going to come from. The idea here is that by dealing with the proposal, because we don't know when the final rules are going to come out, but we do expect that you're going to have a short time frame, you need as much time as you can to react to this. So for each bank that's tuning in today, I applaud you for saying, it's not just a proposal. This is an important proposal, and we need to get to work on this quickly. And as a result of that, you're digging into these things. When we talk about the APR changes, this rule, the proposal, is essentially going to make a huge change as to how that annual percentage rate is calculated. Not necessarily, we're not talking about the math of the APR, we're talking about GIGO, garbage in, garbage out, and that's where a lot of banks have had problems, is inputting what's a finance charge, as an example. Well, consumers have had the same problem trying to understand what a finance charge is. It's these upfront costs, it's the cost of credit. There's a lot of things that you can look at and talk about as far as being the finance charges, but there's always the but if. And this rule is to make that a little bit simpler. So the scope of this proposal essentially is to come out and say that most closed-end consumer mortgages, and those are the loans that we're focusing on, are going to be impacted by simplifying what's going to go into the finance charge. That's really what we're going after today. Now, it's not going to include home equity lines of credit. It's not going to include reverse mortgages if your institution's one of them doing that. It's not going to talk about mortgages that are secured just by that mobile home or some other dwelling where you don't have the real property. It's really focused on those dwelling where you've got the dirt as well that's going to be included in your loan. I want to indicate that I think that there have been there's several references in here that talk about the Federal Reserve Board's proposals. The CFPB didn't start from scratch. As an example, there was a Federal Reserve Board. The Fed originally had ownership, quote unquote,